I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking in hollow beats that seemed louder than usual. The house felt too still, too carefully arranged, as though silence itself was hiding something I wasn't meant to notice. For years, I told myself this was safety, our marriage, our home, his smile. But lately, even the air seemed to shift when he entered the room. When Daniel walked in, he wore that familiar half-smile, charming enough to fool anyone who didn't know better. His tie loosened, his sleeves rolled. He looked like a man who'd worked hard and come home to rest. But I saw the shadows in his eyes, the ones he thought he could hide from me. "Long day?" I asked, keeping my tone light. He kissed my cheek absently. "Aren't they all?" His voice was soft, but the weight beneath it pressed on me like an invisible hand. I wanted to believe his exhaustion was ordinary, the kind any husband might carry after work. Yet I couldn't ignore how often he drifted away in thought, how his gaze lingered on me as if he was calculating something instead of admiring. The lamp by the window flickered, catching the sharp angle of his jaw. For a moment he looked like a stranger standing in my kitchen. I forced myself to smile, to keep playing the role of the trusting wife. But my chest tightened with questions I didn't dare ask. Sometimes at night I caught him pacing downstairs, murmuring words too faint to catch. Sometimes his phone lit up at hours that made no sense, and he would shield the screen from me. Tiny fractures, hairline cracks in the glass of our marriage. Alone they were easy to dismiss. Together they formed a pattern I couldn't ignore. "Dinner smells good," he said, sitting down, his tone gentle again. I nodded, serving him as though everything was ordinary. But in my mind, a single truth was forming. The man I married was slipping away, and something darker was taking his place. And yet I stayed silent, not knowing that this silence would become my greatest mistake. That night, as Daniel sat across from me at the dinner table, his smile lingering just long enough to disarm me, I couldn't help but drift backward into memory. It's strange how love rewrites itself over time, how the man you swore to spend forever with can become a stranger. And yet, I still remembered the first time I saw him. He was magnetic, standing at the edge of a crowded bar, laughing in a way that drew every eye. When he noticed me, it felt deliberate, like he had chosen me out of the noise and chaos. He carried himself with confidence that bordered on arrogance, but I told myself it was strength, not danger. "You looked so nervous," he once teased when we reminisced about our first date. I wasn't nervous, I had argued, though I was lying. "Yes, you were. You held your glass like it was going to save your life," he said, chuckling. His laughter wrapped around me, warm and protective. At the time, I mistook his sharpness for passion. He had a way of making me feel seen, as if every word I spoke mattered more than anyone else's. When he slipped his arm around me that night, I felt protected, chosen. It wasn't until much later that I understood protection could also mean possession. I remember the night he first whispered, "Forever." We were lying in his apartment, the city glowing outside his window, and his voice was steady, convincing. "Forever, no matter what?" I asked. He brushed hair from my face, his eyes burning with something I couldn't name. "No matter what. You're mine." At the time, it thrilled me. I was 23 and naive, craving certainty, and Daniel gave it to me in spades. What I didn't see was how ownership had slipped into his promise, how his love always came with invisible chains. Now, sitting in our kitchen years later, I felt those words echoing differently inside me. "You're mine." They weren't romantic anymore. They were suffocating. I stirred my food absent-mindedly, watching him eat in silence. The Daniel I married was still there in fragments. The smile, the charm, the strength, but beneath it, shadows shifted, growing darker with each passing night. I told myself it was nothing, just the strain of adulthood, of marriage. But deep down, I knew it was more. And soon I would find out exactly how much more, when the locks clicked, and I realized escape was no longer mine to choose. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. I rose from the couch to step outside, craving the cool air to clear my mind. But when I reached the front door, the handle refused to turn. The deadbolt, which I had never seen him use before, was locked tight from the inside. "Daniel," I called softly, keeping my voice calm, though unease tightened in my chest. "Did you lock this?" He appeared behind me almost instantly, as though he had been waiting. "Of course I did," he said. "It's late. You never know who's out there." I pressed my palm against the wood, my heartbeat quickening. "But I've never needed a key to leave our own house." His laugh was low, meant to be dismissive. "You're imagining things. You're tired. You always get worked up when you're tired." The words stung, not because of what he said, but because of how easily he said them. A familiar pattern, undermining, deflecting, wrapped itself around his tone. "I just wanted some air," I whispered. "You don't need air," he replied, stepping closer, his presence filling the narrow space. "You need rest. You need me to keep you safe. Isn't that what you always said you wanted?" I turned to face him, searching for the man I once trusted. His expression was calm, too calm, but his eyes gleamed with something harder, something that made me shiver. "Safe?" My voice cracked. "Or trapped?" His jaw tightened. For a moment the mask slipped, and I saw irritation flash across his features. Then just as quickly he softened it into a smile. "Don't be dramatic. You sound crazy when you talk like that, gaslighting again. Twisting my words, bending my reality until I questioned my own instincts." I wanted to scream, to shove him aside and prove to myself the lock was real. But I stayed still, caught between fear and disbelief. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Shadows stretched long across the floor as the night deepened, and I realized with a sinking dread that my home no longer belonged to me. Daniel leaned close, his whisper cold against my ear. "You'll thank me one day. Everything I do, it's for us." But deep inside, I already knew. Us was just another word for control, and soon I would discover just how far his control truly went. Sleep would not come that night. Even after Daniel's breathing settled into the rhythm of dreams beside me, I lay awake, staring into the dark, my mind circling the locked door, his words, the smile that never reached his eyes. I needed proof, something to tell me I wasn't losing my grip on reality. So, when the clock struck past 2 and the house seemed to sink into silence, I slipped from the bed. My bare feet pressed against the cold floor as I moved carefully, every step echoing in my chest. I told myself I was only looking, nothing more. But deep down, I already feared what I would find. The study felt colder than the rest of the house, as if the walls themselves disapproved of my presence. Papers stacked too neatly, drawers aligned with precision. My hand trembled as I pulled the first one open. Bills, receipts, ordinary things. But the second drawer stuck, resisting as though warning me away. I pulled harder. The drawer slid open with a faint groan, and the chill that rushed out made my skin prickle. Inside lay objects that didn't belong to any life I thought we shared. Photographs of women I didn't recognize, some smiling, some caught mid-step on the street as if they hadn't known they were being watched. A folded letter, edges yellowed, scrawled in a handwriting I didn't know. A silver bracelet, bent and tarnished, too delicate to be mine. My breath caught. I lifted one photograph, her eyes wide, caught in the flash, frightened. And my hand shook so violently I almost dropped it. "What is this?" I whispered to the empty room, though I already knew I wouldn't get an answer. The bracelet clinked against the wood as I set it back down, my stomach twisting. Every piece told a story I couldn't yet see, but all of them ended in dread. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I froze, my heart pounding in my ears. For a second, I imagined Daniel's shadow filling the doorway, his calm smile masking whatever storm brewed beneath. But the sound faded, perhaps just the house settling. I closed the drawer slowly, my hands clammy against the wood. The evidence lay hidden again, but the truth was out. It lived now in my chest, burning, undeniable. I crept back to bed, sliding under the covers before Daniel stirred. His arm draped lazily across me, possessive even in sleep, and in the darkness I understood. The man beside me carried secrets sharp enough to cut me open. Soon, I would have no choice but to confront them. The morning after, I couldn't keep the drawer out of my mind. Every photograph burned in my memory. Every object whispered questions I couldn't silence. My hands shook as I set down his coffee, the porcelain rattling against the saucer. Daniel looked up, his eyes narrowing. "You're quiet today." I didn't sleep, I admitted, my voice tighter than I intended. "Nightmares again?" His tone was casual, practiced. as if he had rehearsed this role of the concerned husband. I met his gaze, and the words slipped out before I could stop them. Who were they? His fork paused midair. For a heartbeat, he said nothing, only studied me with that sharp, assessing stare. Then he set the utensil down carefully, too carefully, as though containing something volatile. What do you mean? He asked softly. The women, I whispered. The photos. The drawer in your study? Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then he laughed, not with amusement, but with disbelief. You went through my things. You left me no choice, I said. My voice cracked, but I pressed on. Tell me the truth, Daniel. Were you watching them, following them, sleeping with them? His smile flickered, broke, reformed. You sound insane. Do you hear yourself? You're jealous of strangers in old photographs. Don't twist this, I snapped, my fists clenched against the table. You've been lying to me. About the money. About the late nights. About everything. His eyes darkened, and for the first time I saw the storm he tried so hard to cage. You think you know me? You don't know anything. Then tell me, I demanded. Tell me who I married. For a moment, his face softened, almost tender. He reached across the table, brushing my hand. I married you because you needed me. Because you were lost and I gave you purpose. I've kept you safe when no one else cared. I yanked my hand back. Safe or controlled? The mask dropped. His voice hardened. Without me, you're nothing. Don't forget that. The room seemed smaller, the air heavier, as though the walls themselves leaned in. I realized then the 4 hours had already begun, and escape was slipping further out of reach. And with each passing second, I didn't know which version of Daniel I'd face, the man who claimed to love me, or the stranger who might destroy me. The silence after his words felt heavier than any scream. I sat frozen at the table, my heartbeat hammering so loudly I thought it might betray me. Daniel's eyes, dark, unreadable, shifted like a storm cloud, and I realized the fragile balance between us had snapped. Nothing. I repeated, my voice trembling. You think I'm nothing without you? He rose slowly, the chair scraping harshly against the floor. I didn't say think. I said no. I pushed back, standing too quickly, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. His shadow loomed larger as he stepped forward, calm in his movements but burning with a rage he no longer tried to hide. Daniel, don't... The sound of glass shattering cut my plea short. His hand had swept the coffee cup from the counter, sending it exploding against the tiles. Splinters of ceramic scattered across the floor, sharp and white like broken teeth. Look what you make me do, he hissed. Fear surged, sharp and electric. I backed away, my heel catching on a rug. He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist, his grip bruising. Let go, I cried, twisting, nails scraping his skin. His face twisted, half pain, half fury. You never knew me, he snarled. The words struck like a blade, but I fought back, desperation overriding terror. I wrenched free, shoving him with all my strength. He staggered, hitting the edge of the table, a picture frame toppling to the floor. Blood bloomed where my nails had torn his forearm, crimson against his pale skin. The sight startled him, if only for a breath. We stood there, panting, the room scattered with fragments. Broken glass, overturned chairs, the smear of red on his arm. My chest heaved as I pressed myself against the wall, every muscle screaming to run, though the locked doors mocked me with their silence. His breathing grew ragged, animalistic. He wiped at the blood and stared at it, almost mesmerized, then slowly looked back at me. See what you've done? You turned me into this. Tears blurred my vision, but I lifted a shard of glass from the floor, holding it tight though it cut into my palm. Stay back, I whispered, my voice shaking. He smiled then, cold and cruel. You think you can survive me? The house seemed to vibrate with his words, and in that moment I knew. Survival wasn't a choice anymore. It was the only thing left. My hand still clutched the shard of glass, the sting in my palm reminding me this was real, not some nightmare I could wake from. Daniel's eyes locked on mine, cold and unblinking, his lips curling into something between a sneer and a smile, and then 3 sharp knocks echoed through the hallway. Both of us froze. The sound was ordinary, almost casual, yet it sliced through the air like a warning bell. My stomach lurched. For the first time, I saw something flicker in Daniel's expression. Hesitation. He turned toward the door, then back at me. "Not a word," he hissed, voice low and lethal. The knocks came again, louder this time. "Daniel, everything all right in there?" A man's voice, Mr. Carter, our next-door neighbor. He had the annoying habit of checking in whenever he thought something was amiss. Tonight, his nosiness felt like salvation. Daniel's posture shifted instantly. He straightened his shirt, wiped his bloodied arm on a towel, and smoothed his expression into the mask of a genial husband. When he opened the door, his voice rang with false warmth. "Evening, Tom, just a late night." "Everything's fine." From where I stood, half hidden in the dim kitchen, I caught Mr. Carter's skeptical glance past Daniel's shoulder. His eyes landed on me. "You okay?" he asked, tone casual but edged with concern. My throat tightened. Daniel's hand gripped the doorframe like an anchor, his body angled just enough to block me. Still, I forced myself to nod, though my eyes pleaded for him to see the truth. "She's tired," Daniel said smoothly. "You know how it is." "Long week," Mr. Carter hesitated. The silence dragged, thick and suffocating. For one dizzying second, I thought he might step inside, might press further. But then he offered a polite smile. "All right then. Just checking. Good night." The door clicked shut, and with it my fragile hope collapsed. Daniel turned slowly, the charm draining from his face. His eyes burned with fury, silent promises of what I'd pay for almost exposing him. And in that suffocating quiet, I realized the knock hadn't saved me. It had only made him more dangerous. The moment the door clicked shut behind Mr. Carter, the silence thickened like smoke. Daniel stood motionless, staring at me, his expression no longer masked by charm. The air between us carried the weight of everything unsaid. Everything I feared was about to spill free. "You couldn't keep your mouth shut for 5 minutes?" he asked, his voice low but shaking with restrained fury. I wanted to scream, I admitted, my words trembling as they left me. I wanted to beg him to stay, to take me away from here. But I didn't. I stayed quiet like I always do. His eyes narrowed. "Because you know better." "No," I said, my voice breaking. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the counter for balance. "Because I'm afraid of you. Afraid of what you'll do to me if I tell anyone what's really happening in this house." For a moment, the room stilled. Then he stepped closer, his face unreadable. "Afraid of me?" He almost sounded amused, as if the idea entertained him. "You lock me in. You watch me like I'm a prisoner. And that drawer, those photographs, those women. What were you doing with them, Daniel?" He exhaled slowly, the mask slipping further. "You shouldn't have seen that." "Then tell me," I demanded, desperation cracking my voice. "Tell me who they were. Tell me who you are." His gaze hardened, but he didn't look away. "They were mistakes. People who didn't matter. People who thought they could leave me, take pieces of me with them." My stomach dropped. "What happened to them?" He smiled faintly, though his eyes were dead. "You really want to know? Or do you want to keep pretending this life of ours is still clean?" The words pierced me, confirming what I had feared but couldn't name. I pressed my hands to my face, sobs tearing free. "You're not the man I married. You're not even the man I thought I knew." Daniel's voice softened, almost gentle. "I've always been this man. You just chose not to see it." His hand brushed my shoulder, and I recoiled as if burned. The walls seemed to close in, the air too thick to breathe. "Don't cry," he whispered. "You're stronger than this. That's why I chose you. You won't run. You can't." And in that suffocating moment, I realized he was right. There was nowhere left to run. The air was thick with the taste of iron and dread. My tears had dried into salt on my skin, but inside something darker was rising, something sharper than fear. His hand hovered near my face, not a caress but a threat disguised as tenderness. "You'll stay," Daniel murmured, his voice steady, final. "You'll stay because you belong to me." Something in me snapped. The words no longer sounded like love. They sounded like a death sentence. "No," I whispered, my throat raw. "Not anymore." He tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "What did you just say?" I felt my hands moving before my mind could catch up. The shattered glass from the earlier struggle still glittered across the floorboards. My fingers closed around a jagged piece, sharp enough to promise pain. I lifted it, my chest heaving, my voice trembling but firm. "You don't own me." The world seemed to collapse into a blur of sound and movement. He lunged, I swung. His hand caught my wrist, twisting hard, but the glass cut into his palm, releasing a crimson spray across the wooden floor. He roared in pain, shoving me back against the wall. The impact rattled my bones, but adrenaline burned through the shock. I kicked hard, striking his knee. He faltered, cursing, and I drove the shard upward, grazing his arm. Blood smeared between us, hot and slick. His face twisted with both fury and disbelief. "You'd kill me?" he gasped. "You already killed us," I spat, every word a dagger. He staggered, gripping his wounded hand, and for the first time, I saw him hesitate, not invincible, not untouchable, but breakable. The seconds stretched into eternity. My breath came in ragged bursts. His shoulders heaved. Then with a guttural sound, he charged again. This time I didn't wait. I brought the glass down with all the strength left in me. The sound, shattering, tearing, echoed louder than my scream. Daniel collapsed, the fight draining out of him, his body folding onto the blood-streaked floorboards. I stood over him, shaking, the weapon slipping from my hand. My chest rose and fell in violent spasms. The house was silent except for my pounding heartbeat. 4 hours, 4 endless, suffocating hours. And now it was over. Or had I only unleashed another nightmare? I backed away, unable to tell if I had escaped or if I had crossed a line I could never return from. The silence was deafening. Daniel's body lay crumpled across the floorboards, blood soaking into the cracks like it had been waiting for this moment all along. My chest heaved, but no sound came. My voice had been swallowed by the house itself, as if it were complicit, holding its breath with me. Then, knocking. Firm, urgent, relentless. "Mrs. Hale? Are you all right?" We heard shouting. The neighbors. The world beyond our 4 walls had not been blind to the storm. Panic shot through me. Every scream, every crash, every desperate word. I hadn't realized how much of it would bleed through into the night air. I tried to speak, but my throat locked. My hands trembled, sticky with his blood. The knock became pounding. "We're calling the police." Moments blurred. Sirens wailed in the distance, approaching like wolves. Red and blue lights soon flooded the window panes, painting Daniel's face in grotesque shades of flashing color. When the front door burst open, I stumbled forward, almost collapsing into the officer's arms. He wouldn't let me go," I stammered, the words shredded, unsteady. Their flashlights cut across the room, halting on Daniel's unmoving form. Commands filled the air, sharp and rehearsed, but I could barely hear them. One officer steadied me. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" I shook my head, though my body felt split open, every nerve screaming. I wasn't sure if I was victim, survivor, or executioner. Another officer crouched beside Daniel, checking for signs of life. His radio crackled. "We've got one down. Severe blood loss," the words twisted in my gut. I clutched the wall, my nails scraping against the paint. All I could think of were those neighbors, ears pressed to walls, dialing 911, whispering to one another about the couple no one ever really knew. Their reports had summoned salvation or judgment. Maybe both. I looked around at the house, once a sanctuary, now a crime scene. Blood glistened beneath the flickering light, shards of glass like scattered confessions. The officer's hand pressed lightly on my shoulder. "We'll need your statement." My lips parted, but nothing came. All I could think was, they heard everything, and now the truth belongs to them. They kept me in a quiet room at the station, walls pale and sterile. But even there I could feel him. Daniel. His shadow stretched longer than the life he left bleeding across our floorboards. Detectives shuffled papers, whispered names I didn't recognize, until one finally sat across from me. His eyes were steady, but what he carried in his folder was heavier than pity. "Mrs. Hale," he began, his voice low, "you need to know who your husband really was." I wanted to protest. I thought I already knew. The man who made me laugh on our first date. The man who promised me forever beneath trembling vows. The man who both kissed me tenderly and locked me in my own home. But then the pages slid across the table. Mugshots, reports, cold photographs of faces I had never seen, some marked missing, others unsolved. Daniel's name threaded through them like a curse. He was connected to multiple investigations, the detective said. Financial fraud, disappearances. We think he lived under 2 names for years. The words blurred. My hands shook as I reached for the papers, as if by touching them I could confirm or erase the nightmare. But the evidence didn't flinch. Unsolved crimes, betrayals, bodies that never found peace. My stomach twisted. I realized that every smile, every whispered endearment had been performed by a man who wore masks better than truth. I thought of the drawer I had opened, the secrets I had touched. I had been sleeping beside a stranger, a man no one ever truly knew. And yet, hadn't I known something? Hadn't I felt the unease, the cracks, the lies he coated with charm? My silence, my denial, my love. They were accomplices, weren't they? The detective leaned forward. You're not responsible for what he did. But his words couldn't pierce the weight pressing on my chest. Because part of me wondered, had I been a victim or a partner in his silence? I closed my eyes, the images burned there forever. Daniel was gone, but the truth had not set me free. It had only chained me to a darker reality, that marriage is not only vows and love, but also the shadows you ignore until they consume you. And now, I was left alone with the haunting cost of knowing the husband no one truly knew.